the same brand. And scenario number 2 is that you buy each equipment from a different brand, or you have the freedom of choosing the brand for every single equipment, right? So Angular falls in the first category, where most of the things that are supposed to be done in Angular, Angular has its own flavor of it, or Angular has its own version of it. Whereas in terms of React, it doesn't always have its own flavor of it. In case if you want to, you can definitely go ahead and use the library that React already offers, but you also have the flexibility of choosing something of your own. So this kind of flexibility is something that you will get with React. All right, now that we have spoken a little bit about the technicalities of React, let's try to understand how it is, how it functions, what makes it special, and why are we talking about it in the first place. React is one of the most industry requirement or industry leading profiles right now. Whenever we talk about front-end development, you pick up any job on LinkedIn Jobs and see the profile for a front-end engineer. You will find React for sure. You will see skills like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then there is a very high possibility that you will also see React. React is extremely lightweight and very, very fast. And that is what makes it very much in demand. So there is a lot of stuff that is related with React that we can do in this video. And let's go ahead and try to understand and delve slightly deeper into React to understand what can be done. So moving ahead, let me just get to my screen and let me just show you how we can actually create our React application. In order to create your React application, we will again be requiring JavaScript. React is one of these libraries that gives you the flexibility of programming your code in JavaScript as well as TypeScript. Because JavaScript is more accessible and understood by the audience, we will be covering entire video inside JavaScript programming language only. And just like yesterday, you will require to download Node.js onto your system. In case if you did not watch our yesterday's live video, worry not. We will be covering every single step from the very start. So let's go ahead and start making our very first React application, and then let's try to understand some technicalities towards React, and then we will be writing some code to facilitate our very first application in React. Okay, coming to my screen, let's go ahead and see on the browser, we will try to see something which can help us to download the Node.js software. So I will write nodejs.org and I will close all the other tabs, and then I will click on download node.js. So once I click on it, it will start to download Node.js onto my machine. So in your case, you might actually require to download Node.js onto your machine, but in my case, I actually don't need it because it's already installed. So make sure that you download this on the basis of your operating system and on the basis of the configuration of your processor. If you are on Windows or if you're on Linux, your processor most probably is going to be an x86 Intel based system. Whereas if you are on Mac operating system, you might actually be using Apple Silicon, or you might be using the x86 architecture from Intel. Make sure if you're a Mac user, you download the right architecture for your Node.js software. After you are done downloading it as well as installing it, we will now go ahead and check whether it has been installed or not. For this purpose, we will be opening our terminal. So if you're on Linux or if you're on Mac, you should be able to open your terminal. But on the other hand, in case if you're using Windows, you might need to open your PowerShell or you might need to open your command prompt. If you are on Windows 11 or higher, you can just open terminal and select what kind of terminal you want to open. Because I'm on Mac, I will directly be going ahead and opening my terminal. So let me just write terminal in my Finder and I should get my terminal on my screen right now. Okay, so now we have the terminal window on my screen. Let us go ahead and write our very first command, which is node space -v. So node space -v is going to print us a version of Node.js that is installed on my machine. In my case, it is 20.12.1, which means that the version 20.12.1 is installed on my machine. In your case, if you have just downloaded it, you will see 20.13.1. Okay, so the version might be different. At the time of recording this video, it is 20.13.1, which is the latest version of Node.js. But because I'm on a relatively very closer version of the latest software, I will not go ahead and upgrade it. But only if I was on a very older version, for example, Node.js 18 or 16 or even lower like 14, I would have immediately gone ahead, uninstalled or discarded my current version of Node.js and installed a newer version. There is one more command that we will check, which is npm npm space -v. This will make us know what is the current version of npm onto our machine. npm stands for Node Package Manager, which is very important for JavaScript projects into our machine. All right, so now that we have the most important software ready onto our machines, let us go ahead and create our very first React application. Okay, so to create our very first React application, there is 2 or 3 things that I want to explain to you. So whenever we talk about React, we have to understand one very fundamental concept about React. There is something called as JSX, which we will be seeing in some time onto my screen. Now, what is this JSX? JSX is basically like it's in the most simplest manner. It is like writing HTML inside a JavaScript file. So JSX stands for JavaScript XML, which allows you to write a lot of HTML-like code inside a JS file. And the best part about React, which makes it different from Angular, at least at this point of time, is in Angular, you write the HTML and the component business logic separately. Whereas in React, you write it at the same place. So this is what makes React slightly different from Angular in terms of developer experience. But there are quite a lot of things that are conceptually similar in case of React from Angular. So let us go ahead and start creating our very first React application. Okay, to create our React application, we need to firstly go to the place where we want to create our React application. So let me go to that folder and I will write some relevant commands in order to create our React application. Okay, so let us do that. I will go to my folder cd, then self, then tutoract. Okay, so this is the folder where I actually want to create my React application. Okay, now I will write a command which is like npx, then I will write create dash react dash app, and then I will write the name of my React application that I want to create. So let's say the name of my application is tutoract react app. Okay, so this is the name of my application. Now I'll press return or enter. So what this will do is it will start to create a new React application onto my system. Based on the speed of your internet, this can take some amount of time. Usually it is a time-taking process because it probably tries to download like 400 megabytes or 500 megabytes of file, but it should be fast as long as your internet connection is stable. So as you can see currently on my screen, it is currently downloading the important dependencies for React to run on my machine. All right, so let's wait for the installation to finish. In the meantime, I just want to bring back or talk about JSX once again. So JSX is a very simple way of writing HTML inside JavaScript. Well, it is not 100% HTML. It is very, very similar to HTML. Probably the similarity will go beyond 95%. So as long as you know HTML, you should be able to find JSX extremely simple and easy to use. Okay, so still waiting for the installation to finish, and I'm not even surprised because it usually does take some amount of time. Okay, in the meantime, I would also like to talk to you about another interesting thing, and this interesting thing is called as SPA. And SPA stands for Single Page Application. So whenever we want to create any website, we might have multiple types of sub pages inside the website. Just a moment, I think something has failed. Okay. So let me see the error. Okay, the problem it is suggesting is that, okay, so let me just try to run it once again. And in case if I get this error again, I will try to debug it, but I'm pretty sure it shouldn't be coming another time. But in case if it does, I'll try to add this sudo command on the top of it. Okay, so let me just try to do the sudo command. In case if it doesn't work, we can just go to the documentation, which is provided by React's official documented website, and then we will try to create a new React application. Okay, so I forgot to add npx, because of which this error came. So let me just add npx again. All right, so it is trying to create a new application again. Now let us try and see in case if this works. And I think it has worked, but let's still wait. because it has actually failed 2 times. I was telling you about SPA, right? Let's just, oh, and yes, it actually worked. So great. Usually what happens, or the reason why this problem came is because in Mac and Linux based operating systems, there are quite a lot of files that require touching very root level files, and touching or using these root level files require the administrator access. Because previously I did not use a sudo command, because of which the administrator access was not provided, and therefore the installation was failing. If you are on Windows, probably you would not have faced this issue. But in case if you are on Mac or Linux, on the basis of your administrator access, this issue can come. In case if this issue persists, please try to use the sudo command in order to fix it. I'll try to come back to my initial conversation point, which is SPA, which stands for single page application. In case if you actually develop a front-end application, that website might have multiple pages, right? Let's say you're trying to start a new business, and inside this new business, you want to have multiple pages. Let's say a home page, a contact us page, an about us page, and etc. etc. If we talk about the conventional ways, the way it would actually work is you will have to create a new HTML page for every single page you want to display. Whereas in case of React and also Angular, because it is also SPA, what happens is that there is only one HTML file, and this HTML file consistently changes as and how you actually use your application. This happens because there is a concept called as a virtual DOM, which is involved between the React application and the main real DOM. And this virtual DOM is actually going to make changes to the real DOM as and when required using plain JavaScript. Let us now go ahead into our React application, which we have just created, and start to look at our folder structure. Okay, so now that it is created, let me just open Visual Studio Code, and I will open this project. So I'll go to open folder. I'll go to Tuterac. It should be inside A, then self, and then inside Tuterac, we should have Tuterac React app. So this is our React application, which is currently now open on my Visual Studio Code. Okay, so here you will see an SRC folder, and inside SRC folder, you will see something called as app.js, and you will also see index.js. Unlike Angular, React does not necessarily need to follow a very rigid structure of folders. You are free to use any folder structure of your choice. Okay, so our application will always start from index.js file, which is going to control only one HTML file which is present inside our React application, and that is index.html, which should be present in public folder. So you will see that inside this index.html, there is a div whose ID is root, and in the already predefined file that we get just after creating our React application, there is a code that is written. It says this HTML file is a template. If you open it directly in the browser, you will see an empty page. You can add web fonts, meta tags, or analytics to this file. The build step will place the bundled scripts into the body tag. To begin development, run npm start or yarn start. All right, so let's try to run our application by writing npm start. So I will write npm start. As soon as I write npm start, it will try to start my React application, and it gives me an error which is saying that it's having an issue because of the dependency. Okay, let's try to make sure that that dependency does exist. Okay, let's do one thing. Let me just close the terminal, restart the terminal. Let me just write npm install with a sudo command. Making sure all the dependencies are existing, and then I will write sudo npm start, and the development server is up and ready. Super. All right, instead of using Safari, I prefer using my front-end development over a Chromium-based browser like Edge, and I will open this website on localhost 3000. And yep, this is our React application, which is up and running. Okay, so now that our React application is now up and running, now let us go ahead and try to understand some basics of our React application. So coming back to our Visual Studio Code, which is present over here, I want to talk to you about what each of these files would mean. So .css file would of course be the CSS for app.js. .test.js file is of course the test file. Index.css is the overall CSS for our application. Index.js is the entry point of our application. And app.js is actually a component. Now, in yesterday's video also, we did talk about component when we were talking about Angular. So the concept of component in Angular or React or even any other front-end framework is going to be the same. What is a component? A component is a reusable piece of code. Suppose, let's say you have a piece of code that you want to show at multiple places. This piece of code or this piece of UI does not necessarily change over time, or even if it does change over time, it needs to be changed at every single place. So what you can do is you can put this piece of UI inside a component, and this component will have its own identity. So once you put it inside a component, you can just use this component every single place you require it to. Just like in basic programming, we create a function, and this function might have some arguments, a name of the function, and a return type. Just like that, a component can also have arguments, and then a component will also have a name. But in this case, a component will always and always return something, which is a UI element. So that is what components do. Okay, so in case of React or any other front-end framework, a component is a basic unit of UI, which is very important in terms of a modern front-end development technology. So in React, every single thing starts with a component. A component is extremely important for React. So right now in React, as soon as we created our very first application, we already got a component called as app.js. Now every single thing that we want to use, we can put components inside another component also. So let's say we want to create 5-6 components. We can put all of these components inside app.js or howsoever we want to use it. All right, let's go ahead and try to create something called as a counter component. In this counter component, we will try to make sure that we have a count which we can increase or we can decrease. Let's go ahead and see how we can achieve this. All right, so what I will do is, firstly, I'll create a new folder and I will call it components. Okay, there is some problem with this code editor for some reason. Let me just reopen it. Okay, so now that I've reopened it, let's try to create a new folder again. Components. It's not letting me. Okay, let's try to create it like this. mkdir src/components. Oops, wrong password. Okay, so now we have a new folder. Inside this, let's try to create a new file. Let's say counter.js. Again, it's not letting us. All right, we will just use a different way to do this. So I will write touch, and then I will write src/components slash counter.js. Says permission denied. I think I'll have to fix the permission issue that is currently coming on my system. Let me just fix it. I will need some Google help. So let's say fix permission or give, or you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna destroy this Node.js project, this React project that we have created. Probably there was something wrong with the administrator access that I did at the time of creating my application. So what I will do is I will destroy this project and create a fresh project, and then we will start from there. As you can see, as of now, I have not added or made any changes to the actual code that we got as soon as we created our React application. So we will destroy this project and start a new project altogether. I'll just require you to bear with me for 2 extra minutes until we get this done. Okay, so what I will do is I will close my Visual Studio Code. I will destroy my folder. So I will write rm/rf, and then I will write Qt React app. So it is saying that I can't delete it because I don't have the access. So I'll write again Qt React app. I'll give it the password. I hope it's, yep, and the deletion is complete. All right, so this time what we're going to do is we're going to take a different method. But before that, if you're on Windows, you probably would have not experienced this error. All right, so let's come to this place and I will write create-react-app. Okay, so we should be going to the official documentation of React, where we can actually see what we can do in order to start our application. So this is the kind of command that we were writing previously, right? Let's try to write it again. So I will write npx or I will close this terminal instance and open a new terminal and start doing it again. So a/self/tutorack, and over here I will write npx create reate-react-app, and then I will write tutorack react-app. Press enter. I hope it does not resolve into an error at the time of installing my application like it did last time. So let's wait for it to finish. It's still resolving the dependencies. So what npx is going to do is, it's going to, like, what happens, or what usually happens is that there is a create React app script, and you can actually install it globally on your machine. In case if you don't want to install it globally on your machine, you can use the npx command, which is what I'm trying to do over here. So in case if that doesn't work, we can still have an option of installing the create React app script globally onto our machine, and then just use create React app without npx in order to execute and create our new React application. So we will do that only and only if this method does not work. So still waiting for the resolution to complete. It does take some amount of time on the basis of the speed of your internet connection. So still waiting for all the resolution to finish. Okay, it seems like it worked, but let's see. Yep, it worked. Thank God. All right, so now that it has worked, let's go ahead and open it again into my Visual Studio Code. And yep, here we are. Let's try to create a new folder. Let's hope that this time we are able to create a new folder inside it called components. And yep, it worked. Great. Let me just restart my application. So I will write npm start, and it will start my application on Safari because it's my default browser. But like I said, I like to use Microsoft Edge over Safari for development. Okay, so coming back to my Visual Studio Code, I was just telling you about creating components. So let me create my first component, and I will name it counter.js. Okay, so when we talk about components in React, we have two options. We can choose to create a component which is a class type, or we can choose to create a component which is a function type. So there are two types of components: class-based component and functional components. If you did attend yesterday's live session, we also talked about the concept of components in Angular. But in Angular, all components are a class type. In React, we have both the options, a class type as well as a function type. The modern standard of React promotes the functional usage of component. So what we will be doing is, we will also be using the functional component. Okay, so let's write const, and let's write the name of our component, which is going to be counter in this case. And yep, this is our component. So I will write export default counter. All right, so we will write the logic of this component over here. So I told you a few minutes ago about something called as JSX, which allows us to write JavaScript, or which allows us to write HTML-like code inside our JavaScript files. So let's go ahead and try to write the UI for this counter component. Because it's like a function, in this case it is literally a function, it can return a piece of UI. So we can write something like this. So as you can see, I am writing HTML code inside JS file. So as you can see, I've made use of the div tag. So over here, I will write the count is, let's say for now 0. And then there are two buttons as well. There are two buttons in another div. Let's say button, which does increase. And there's another button which does decrease. Okay, I saved it. And now I want to show this component on the screen. So currently, index.js is the file which is the entry point of our React application. And inside it, the app component is running. So any changes we make to our app component is going to be reflective on the screen. So I will remove everything which is already present over here, and I will add counter. So this is how we call a component in React, which means the app component is actually rendering the counter component. That is what it means. So in order to make this slightly more readable for you, we can just add a div, and inside it we can add a paragraph. This is app, and just below it I will write counter like this, and I will save it. Now that I go back to my Microsoft Edge, you can see that it says this is app, and then it says the count is 0 with two buttons, increase and decrease. All right, so our component is ready on the screen, but now we haven't actually added a logic to our component. So whenever we want to add logic to our component, we go to that components file and start writing actual JS code in order to facilitate the business logic that we want to implement. So to do this, what we will be doing is, we'll come to our counter component and then we will start to create functions. So let's create that function, let's say on button click. It's a function that I'm trying to create by myself. And let's say I also add a type. So let me just add a type over here, which is going to be a string type. And then I will write an if else condition. So if type is, let's say increase, then in that case, increase the count, otherwise, or else if type is decrease, then decrease the count, right? This is something similar is what we have to do, right? So let's try to see how we can actually increase and decrease the count. So for this, we will need a variable which is currently storing the current value of count. So for this, I will write, let's say const count, or let's say let count is equals to 0. Okay, or for initially, let's say I write it 5. Okay, so here instead of 0 over here, I want to present the actual count variable. So to do this, we need to write a JS variable, which I can write just like this. So in Angular, we write it inside double curly brackets, but in React, we just write it inside a single curly bracket. So I'll save it and I'll go back to my screen and I'll run it. Now you can see that the count is already coming as 5. Okay, now let's try to increase or decrease the value. So to increase the value, I can just write, let's say count plus plus, and here I can write count minus minus. Okay, let's try to run it. If I click on increase, you will see that the count value is not changing. And if I click on decrease, you can see that the count value is again not changing. Interesting, right? In case if it does show the count value over here, why is it not changing the count value every single time we are hitting a increase or decrease function? Because we haven't added the event listeners. Let's try to add the event listeners. So let's try to add it over here on click. I will write, I'll try to write what I basically want. So I want to run the on button click function with the type of increase. Okay, and over here, I actually want to write on click function with the type as on button click, but with decrease. Okay, so this is what we want. And let's say I also do something similar or something weird. Let's say I put up a console.log statement where I'm trying to print the value for count. Okay, so this is what I'm trying to do. After change. Okay, so this is what I'm trying to print. I'll go back to my browser, refresh it, go to inspect, and then go to console. I'll clear everything up. If I click on increase, you can see it says after change 6. If I click on decrease, it says after change 5. And if I keep on going further, you can see that the value is actually changing. But if the value is actually changing, why is it not changing on the screen? It's still showing 5, right? It's not really showing 4 or 3 or 2 or 1, or it's not technically changing on the times or on the basis of this button click that we are actually doing. This is because React has a concept called as a state. State is basically a variable which can control or which will change over the period of time. And if there is any variable which will change over the period of time and the change of this variable needs to be presented on the screen, then that variable needs to be present in the state. So in this case, count is that variable because we want to change or we want to show the changing values of count on the screen, because of which we need to make count as a state variable. Now, in order to make use of states, we have a few functions which are inbuilt inside React that can make a certain variable as a state. Let's go ahead and try to see how it can be done. So in React, we have a function called as useState. So let's try to import it, useState. And you can see that it has already been imported for me. So it is from React library. And because I told you that I want to make the count variable as state, so I will try to write something like this. So I'll write const count, comma, set count is equals to use state 0. What does this mean? So what it means over here is that over here you can see that use state is a function call that I have done, and inside it I have passed a value. So whatever value you pass inside use state, that becomes the default value or the initial value of that certain state. In this case, it is returning an array which contains only two objects. The first object is going to represent the variable which is going to be the state, and second variable or second object inside the array is actually a function which can change the value of the state. So unlike normal variables, we can't do plus plus or minus minus or assignments onto the state variable, which we would be able to do to the normal variables. React wants you to use the setter function all the time in order to change the value of the state. So we will do the same thing over here. So right now we want to change the value for count to +1. So we will write set state or set count +1. So this is how we will increase the value for count. And over here I will write set count as count -1. Now we will save it and we will go back and we will clear it up. And if I click on increase, you can see that the value is now changing. And if you click on decrease, you can see that the value is now decreasing as well. Let's say I want to add an extra layer of check, which means that the value can never go lesser than 0. In that case, what we will do is we will add an extra check over here. Let's say I write another if condition. And if I say if count is greater than 0, only then we want the set count to happen. Okay, so we'll go back, we'll click on decrease, and now the value does not go lower than 0. If we try to return or implement this counter multiple times over here, you will notice that for each counter, the values are separate. Right? So the same thing we also saw in yesterday's video when we were talking about Angular. So we technically implemented the same things in React and Angular separately. So that's pretty much it from my side for this video. Let's go ahead and see in case if we have any questions. So we have some interesting questions that are present on the screen right now. So I see one interesting question that comes up to me is that what is the difference between Angular and React? Okay, so like I've told you previously as well, so Angular is like a full package of front-end development, whereas React offers you your own flexibility and freedom to actually make your own choice. React is lightweight compared to Angular. Angular is more verbose and heavier, whereas React is lightweight and faster. Secondly, Angular is made by Google and React is made by Meta. Angular contains different and separate files for component and the UI, whereas React contains the business logic, which is the component file, and the UI inside the same file like we actually saw. And lastly, I think which one to choose depends on personal preferences and requirements and the skill sets of the team. We have a few more questions. Let's go ahead and see. Which is better, Angular or React? I think I just answered this question. Well, they both are actually pretty good. And it's kind of difficult to compare. But in case if you want to make a choice between Angular or React, I would personally suggest look at your own personal, your own personal skills and your own personal preferences. Both are actually very good, and choosing either of them is a step in the right direction. We have a few more questions. If I know Angular, then will React come easy to me? Of course, it will come easy to you. The same thing happened to me, but in the reverse terminology. So I actually did know React first, and then I had to learn Angular on the job. And to be honest, Angular came very easy to me because I already knew the concepts. But in case of my friend, it was absolutely opposite. So he knew Angular first, and then tried to learn React, and of course, it was easy for him as well. Next question is that hope we are expecting a career path session for non-IT students as well soon. Of course, we are going to have a session for people who are not from the IT background as well, where we can actually help you understand what are the things that you can do in order to make your career in the IT field. What are the first steps that you can take in order to start your career into the IT field? So please stay tuned for TutorTrack or in TutorTrack for more such sessions. We have one more question, which is, how do you manage state in large-scale React applications? And what are the pros of using Context API versus Redux? Well, it's a very technical question, and I'm happy that somebody from the audience actually chose to ask this question. So Context API is by default provided by React. So there is a concept in React called as, I'm not sure what it's exactly called, but what happens is that when you have multiple components that are present inside your React application, and there is a lot of common pieces of information that requires to be shared across each of these components, then we pass from the parent component to child component and so on and on and on. So what happens is that this particular phenomenon is called as prop drilling, because of which the prop is continuously being drilled from a higher level component to a lower level component. So this causes a lot of re-rendering of your component, which makes your application slightly slow. So this is what will happen if we keep using the context API as well. On the other hand, Redux is an optimization of the context API, which allows you to have something called as Redux Store, where it's like a shop. So you go to the shop, take whatever the hell you want, and then come back to your home and use it howsoever you like it. So Redux Store is an optimized way of accessing the information which needs to be present across multiple components or even across the whole application. So the way it actually does provide you that information is extremely optimized and fast and does not actually have to deal with prop drilling. And I think, yep, that's it. So we have technically answered all the questions that were present in the comment section. In case if you have more questions, please feel free to write it down in the comment section of this particular video, and I will get back to these questions the first chance I get. Until then, to stay tuned for more videos like this on Tuterack, and let's stay connected here with Tuterack.